Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parenting is Easy podcast, where we will discuss the pleasures and the frustrations, the good and the bad, and the rewarding and the troubling aspects of parenting. I am your host, Chananya Abraham, and I'm a psychotherapist that specializes in working with teenagers, young adults, and parents with a specific niche in assisting with communication within the family dynamics. While everyone has their own unique journey and experiences as a parent and as a child, there are many common affiliations and attributes that we can all relate to and share. Together, we will learn from personal stories and experiences from parents across many different backgrounds, cultures, and communities. So get comfortable, grab your glass of coffee, and let's get right into the interview.
Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to Parenting is Easy, said no one ever. I am your host, Chananya Abraham, and today we have a special guest. As we get to know him a little bit, just a little bit about what I know about him, and we'll continue going forward. Dr. Bob Saul has been guiding the physical, behavioral, and mental care for children for over 40 years. His parental awareness threshold is a simple framework to actively parent with self-awareness, empathy, and compassion, where children learn to build nurturing relationships, as well as exhibit love and respect for others. And we're going to get more into that in detail as we go on over here. But thank you so much, Dr. Saul, for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm very excited to be here.
Okay, so diving right into it over here. I know that, as we were talking, before this recording came about. What is it about the concept of parenting, and what it is that you do that is so passionate and makes it something that is something that you have been working for over 4 decades?
If I can, let me go back some, because getting to the teaser you gave at the very beginning here is at the end of a 30-year journey. So let me go through some of that to
Please.
give you an idea. Finished my pediatric training and medical genetics training in the early 80s. 1980s, and was dove in, was going to be the best darn doctor you could be, yet, do everything right. But after about, 14, 15 years, I realized I probably wasn't paying back to my community like I should. And I heard a talk that really has had a profound impact on me ever since. I heard 12 words in that talk that have had a profound impact on me. This speaker, who was a healthcare futurist, was talking about, for anything that happens in your community, think of these 12 words. I am the problem. I am the solution. I am the resource. So I need to take personal ownership in what's going on. It's not their drug problem. It's not their homelessness problem. It's got to be my problem. And to be part of the solution, I need to devote my resources. So those 12 words really had a profound impact, but like so many things, it took months for them to sort of sink in terms of, okay, what's that mean? What do I do with it? So I went to my local community and said, put me in, coach, I'm ready to do a bunch of good stuff. And I started getting involved in a variety of community projects, and maybe smugly, so I thought I was really doing good. April 20, 1999, 2 teenagers walk into a high school in Littleton, Colorado, massacre 13 people and kill themselves. I was devastated, and I said to myself, could that happen in my community? And the answer was yes. It actually had happened to a minor degree. And what have I done to make a difference for that? And the honest answer was not enough. So I sat down and tried to figure out what I could do to make a difference, or what my thoughts were, what I could do to make a difference, but what are my thoughts using the bully pulpit as a pediatrician in the community who hopefully is well respected. And I came up with what I considered to be the 5 steps to community improvement, and wrote about those for the next 12, 13 years, wrote over 160 op-ed articles about those 5 steps. And that sort of got me going on this whole journey in terms of what it means to be a good parent. Yep. And those five steps are: 1, learn to be the best parent you can be. And those words were chosen carefully because not everyone has the same skill set as a parent. Sometimes that's because of their education, their socioeconomic
The
circumstances,
background.
their mental health issues. I mean, everyone has various capabilities, and my job as a pediatrician was to help empower them to use those to the best of their ability. And oftentimes, what that meant was for me, instead of telling them what to do, was to gently peer behind the curtain and see how I could empower them to get to where they needed to get to. Over years, with a significant trusting relationship development. So that was number one. Number two was get involved. Number three, I think, is similar but different, is stay involved. Sometimes it's easy to get
Sure.
involved, but it's difficult to stay involved. Number four is the most intuitive, but the most difficult in today's society, love for others. In our divisive uh, society where we go at each other instead of embrace each other, it's very difficult. But number five was, and this has been the most difficult for me over time in terms of trying to understand, is forgiveness. The whole issue of forgiveness needs to be ingrained into this fabric of parenting, community improvement, citizenship development. So those were the five steps, and that's where I sort of took off. And I'll pause to let you ask any
Yeah.
question.
So there's a lot there, and I would love to go through those 5 steps with you, but I want to even back up to this speaker that impacted you with these 12 words. Now, for me personally, and I want to hear more about it from you, how that impacted you, but there's so many things regarding parenting as a spouse, as a friend, that we have to take ownership for and responsibility for. And I think just that itself being a motto, not just for life, which is obviously the most important thing, but make it more specific regarding parenting, regarding being a spouse. How do you feel that has impacted you as a person for who you become today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely had a profound impact on me. And the other thing that I've found is you can change the pronoun. I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource, to we are the problem, we are the solution, we are the resource. And that's sort of how I've sort of evolved in terms of trying to get that message out there, that it's not just me, it's we, and how can we be on this journey together.
Exactly, and I would take it just a step further. I can't take credit for this. It was as a psychotherapist, I get to meet a lot of amazing people, and in one of my groups that I run, we talked about the word "we" and regarding responsibility. So a teacher who is in the group made a comment how the two letters, the W and the E, one of them is very rigid and a lot of lines, and the other one is a lot of curves. You have to have both together. You have to have the rigid and the curves coming together in order to do. Which I thought was a nice way of sort of saying it regarding that's what responsibility is. That's what it's doing. We don't line up.
Yeah.
We're going to be a little rigid. We're going to be a little curvy. We're going to be different, but we have to come together in order to do. And that's taking that responsibility is, I think, so important. And bringing it into our conversation over here regarding parenting. Can you talk for a minute about the concept of responsibility in the parenting for yourself before it comes to the children, so to speak, and what type of person has to? What's the mindset of the person that need to have for themselves regarding that responsibility of who they are in order to be a good parent?
I think the number one thing is a conscious awareness of the relationship of with yourself and with your child. It's that conscious awareness that helps lead you into and be more attuned to what's happening with your child. Because children are different, children are evolving, and each situation
Yeah.
you deal with is different. I mean, how you handle a situation on Monday morning, the exact same set of circumstances might be handled very differently on Thursday morning.
Right.
So it's that awareness of where you are. And related to that, let me give you a little background,
Sure.
because how I sort of got to
Yeah.
that was when I changed jobs late in my career. I took a leadership course. It was called Conscious Leadership. And I must admit, I sort of rolled my eyes. I had to do it, and okay, I'll do it. But it was really an eye-opening experience for me. And simplistically, they talked about a line, and when you were above the line, you were conscious, you were open, you were receptive, and you were ready to learn. When you were below the line, you were closed, you were defensive, and you were always right. And the thing is, as humans, we're going to be above and below the line all the
Constantly,
time.
multiple times a day, even
And
sometimes.
well, I mean, and, we've all been in that 3 o'clock meeting when we're just silent, saying to our inner self, "Oh, this is the most boring meeting I've ever been in." when's this thing gonna be
Right.
done? And the whole point of the conscious leadership is now you are conscious of where you are. You can purposely stay below the line and just stay shut, and then just wait until you know, the hour hand changes to what it's supposed to be, or you could say, okay, I need to change what I'm doing here. I think the same thing holds for parenting, and that's where the parental awareness
Ah,
threshold
there you
comes
go.
in. If you're When you're above the parental awareness threshold, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. When you're below it, you're closed, you're defensive, because I'm the parent, because I told you so. Um, and we're going to be above and below that. And the whole point is being aware of where we are. And we're going to make a lot of bonehead decisions, myself included. Um, and and those aren't in the past; those will still be in the present and future. But the whole point is being aware and trying to consciously adjust in the moment, if you can, and
Yeah.
certainly adjust in retrospect, um, when you
Yeah,
can.
for sure. And I think when a parent is able to see where they are, it's much easier to deal with any situation that you're dealing with. Because if you're realizing, hey, you know what, I didn't have the best day at work today. I had to skip lunch. I had to take care of things, and then you're coming home to kids that, left their coat at school, spilled a water bottle in their knapsack, and they have to take care of homework, and the homework is at someone else's house right now, and they have to make dinner and do everything else. But they realize where they're holding it. You know what? Today's going to be a little of a different day, and if they have to take a dinner a different route regarding how cereal and milk maybe, instead of having a few different items that a mom might be putting together, or having the concept of homework be a little bit different for a day. I think that's okay as well, and that comes with realizing where you're holding. Have you seen this concept of this awareness? Has this changed over the past 3-4 decades regarding how a parent would go about parenting in general?
Um, that's a good question. And maybe I'm just now more aware
Mm.
myself. Um, but when I started in my career, it was, I was in some ways, like most of us professionally, we're sort of flying blind. We're relying specifically on our own experiences, which can be good and bad. We're relying very heavily on what the textbooks tell us, and then we're relying very heavily on our mentors,
Mm.
what they're telling us. We learn with experience how to how we can adapt those to our own purposes to be of more benefit to people. Um, so I think the whole topic of awareness is changing for the good, but I don't know that it was as in the black as I thought it was 30, 40
Mm.
years ago. It might have just been that I was more in the black back
I hear
then.
that. That makes a lot of sense. Because I think we hear a lot of times like, "Oh, back in the good old days." But I think when it comes to a topic like this, where parenting has been around since the beginning of human beings, we change, we adjust. I think the obstacles or the advantages that we have in the world today is different than it was a few decades ago. But at the same time, the concept of parenting, having a connection, having awareness, being there and being present with our children, technically that hasn't changed in many ways. I think making certain types of dinners or screen time is a little bit different than it was a couple of years ago. But I think in general the concept of parenting and what our job is and the responsibility, technically in some ways, I feel like has not changed in a certain way.
I mean, I hear some people talk about that we have coddled our youth more, that we give in more. Um, I don't buy that myself. I mean, I think uh, some parents might have in certain misguided ways, but in general, anything that leads to an increased awareness and consciousness of our own um, abilities and
Yeah,
disabilities, and the same for
for
the
sure.
children, is nothing but healthy.
100%. And it brings me
A
about
a
yeah.
quick,
Go ahead.
well, just a quick example. When my youngest son was like 7 or 8, one night he did something that I thought was very wrong, and unfortunately I blew up and yelled at him, and it turned him into a puddle. Um, and then my wife got mad at me for yelling, and then we went into that family meltdown mode where nobody talks for a couple hours. Everyone just sort of walks past each other. eyes to the floor, grumbling. And then when it was time for bed, I laid down with my son. I said, "Son, I'm so sorry about what happened tonight. I think you did something that was wrong," and went on to explain. But Dad's response was totally inappropriate. And I want to tell you, I'm sorry. We're in this together. I want to work, we want to work together going forward. And he said, "Dad, would you be quiet?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I hate it when you're nice." So I think, and I don't say that to pat myself on the back, but I say that to say it's just the ability to take that step back and look at where you are and what you've done is crucial. Now, a lot of people have difficulties with that, but that's part of what we try to do that's part of what your livelihood is engaged in, and that's what mine has been engaged in, to help people be a little more reflective and aware of where they are and their surroundings.
Oh, for sure. And I think that goes so far when we're able to put aside, like you were saying before, regarding putting aside our own egos and parenting the child that's in front of us. I think goes such long ways regarding the bettering of each child individually. It can be very hard, and I think there is trial and error, and I think one of the things that I loved about your story, and there's something that I know I've worked with, and I've had stories like this myself, and from things that I remember from my parents as well, is the concept of being able to apologize. And I think, and as a parent, the concept of apologizing is so vital, and a lesson that is ingrained in the soul in a child. I remember specifically when I was about 7-8 years old, my dad, having me, when I picked up the phone once and someone was on the phone for him, and he said, "Tell them I'm not home." And I didn't think anything of it at the time, so I said, "Oh, my dad's not home now." Later on that day, we're going for a walk, and he made a comment to me, and he said, "Chananya, like I made a mistake, and I want to tell you about it." I'm like, "What did he do? He's my father. Like, how could he have messed up?" And he told me exactly what happened and how he made a mistake in telling me that he wasn't. He said, "I should have told you that I wasn't available." And at the time, I'm like, okay, I didn't think of anything of it. But here we are, 25 plus years later, and I remember that. I remember exactly where we were walking in Brooklyn, New York. We haven't been there in who knows how many years, and I remember it very specifically because of that impact that it had on me regarding my father making a mistake, and then telling me about it, and how it has left a impact on me. And I think that's such a key thing for all parents to know, the concept of being able to apologize, and how far that can go in giving over messages and the proper messages to our kids. Because if we can't apologize to them, how are they going to be able to apologize to anyone at any time?
Yeah, that gives me that fifth step of community improvement, forgiveness, and I harken back to the very simple but delightful book by Tuesdays with Maury, about and he talks about, in terms of one of the significant lessons was about forgiveness, and it's sort of 3 stages: forgive yourself, forgive others, and do it now. So emphasizing that you have to forgive yourself for what you've been going through, and in that situation, your father said, "Okay, I've got to forgive myself. I made a mistake, and now it's time to hone up to that." To my son, and I need to do it now. And because, to me, the whole issue of apologies and forgiveness is this lifelong learning process. Because when your 4-year-old whacks your 2-year-old, and you say, "Tell him you're sorry," "I'm sorry," that's very different than what the 14-year-old or the 24-year-old or the 44-year-old should be able to do.
100%.
And so that's and it's one of the most difficult things. And associated with that, I think, is also the whole issue of communal forgiveness. It's easy. The American Medical Association many years ago did not allow black physicians, and they corrected that mistake. But about 15 years ago, they wrote a public apology, and they did not have to do that, because they could have easily said, "Well, it wasn't me. I didn't do that." But the issue is, it was us. It was the corporate us. And if we're going to set our moral compass and adjust it going forward, we need to come forward and make these changes. And the same things happens now in my home state of South Carolina. We have difficulties with the issues of the Confederacy, and everyone says, "Well, it wasn't me." No, but it was us, and we need to make a difference. So one of the big things I've learned as a parent is the whole issue of the scope of forgiveness and learning it, and apologies that go along with that.
That goes a very long way. Yeah, 100%. So you talk about those lifelong lessons. Have there been certain lessons or specific anecdotes when it comes to parenting that can stand the test of time that you've seen over the past few decades be similar and haven't changed much regarding how we would be giving things over or teaching lessons or caring for our children?
Well, a couple things. One is, and you've dealt with this in your professional career, is, I mean, the trite expression "never judge a book by its cover" has come back to hit me in the rear end several times. I mean, I remember one night I was seeing a patient. It was a very busy night in the winter. I was seeing a bunch of patients, so I had to see a bunch of patients in a hurry. And there was this one mother just sort of sitting in the corner, and the child was on the exam table. And my immediate response was, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be so difficult. She's not going to understand a word I'm saying, and I'm just going to have to. It's going to be very difficult." And she really didn't interact at all. And when we were done, and I started talking and explaining what was going on, she was the most insightful, engaged parent I'd ever dealt with. But I had prejudged her in terms of what her responses would be. So related to that, the big thing example that I've had with parents and tried to teach parents is, one, you have to be the parent in the room. And it sounds simple to say, but one of the three things that I sort of tell them, one is, whenever something is happening, especially when it doesn't seem to be going your way or how you anticipate it to go, you have to pause.
Beautiful.
Take that veritable deep breath and just pause. Whether that's an internal pause or an external pause, it doesn't matter to me. And then take that moment to assess the situation and then choose a response. But the pause and the assessment can go a long way to making that choice what in retrospect might be the correct choice. Now, it might be the wrong choice, and I've paused and I've assessed and made plenty of wrong choices in the moment. But the point is, okay, if that didn't go well, how can I, in retrospect, pause, assess, and look at my choices and maybe do better going forward?
Yeah, beautiful. That's really...
And the whole other issue I talk about with parents and parenting is the whole issue of discipline. Discipline, in many people's eyes, equals punishment. And I try to emphasize that those two are not synonymous. Remember, the root word for discipline is disciple, which means to teach. So anytime you're going to be disciplining a child, it should be considered a teaching experience. Now, sometimes you're going to have to punish in terms of taking away some privilege, or if they just got in some life-threatening situation, got out of your arms and ran into the street, that's something very different. Sure. But discipline should be a teaching experience, and punishment should be always meet the crime. I mean, if they irritated you, you're not going to be able to watch TV for a week. I mean, that's absurd. So you have to be careful.
Make sure it's apropos, right?
And in my business, unfortunately, we still have to talk about not using corporal punishment. Because and the example was the example parents always tell me, well, my dad gave me a good whooping when I was a kid, and it taught me that I couldn't do that. Well, unfortunately, if you and I have been in situations where we've dealt with enough families that don't have the resources to sort out a good whipping from an abusive relationship, and the great analogy I like is that not everyone that smokes gets lung cancer, but it certainly increases your risk.
That's a good one.
Not everyone that has been sustained physical punishment turns into an abuser or using physical means in the future, but the science is very clear. It certainly increases your risk.
Yeah, I love that line. It's a great line. I have to write that down. So a few things over there that you said that I think were absolutely amazing. Just to follow up on it there. So there's a a DBT therapist, a dialectical behavioral therapist, which is what I train in as well. Cedar Coons, that wrote a phenomenal book on mindfulness in DBT, and he talks a lot about this concept, which is something I've implemented in both my practice and also as a parent, of the pause, and how important and how vital it could be of implementing the pause into everything that we do, not just parenting. And I think the example I like talking about is when we put a pause in that action. So you have something that happens, you put in a pause, and then you have the reaction. By putting in that pause, the amount of control that you now gain of that entire scenario is so much more, if anything, that you probably never even realized you had before. Sort of like when you have, a burst of wind, or someone comes and hits you. So automatically, if you're not going to have any sort of protection, you're going to go flying right away. But if you have some sort of coating around you, the pause, so to speak, it creates a control that you have over that specific scenario so much more. And when you're dealing with children, and they just knocked over the plate of salad that you just put on the table, and really all they were trying to do was get onto their chair, and they didn't even see the salad bowl. They didn't realize what was happening in the first place, and they didn't mean to knock over the salad bowl. Okay, so what am I doing in that situation? Am I going to scream at them, or am I going to make sure that they're okay first, and then have them help me clean up in that type of case? And I think that when we have that sense of self and that composure, it changes the entire scenario, and it gives us full control. I think the words that he used, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, is we're not a slave to our emotions anymore when we put in the pause. And I think that creates a sense of us being in control over something when we put in that pause. And I think that goes so far regarding how we deal with so many things as well. So I thought that was a very good point, and something that I agree with. What is something on this point specifically? What is something that a parent can do to try to help implement that pause? Because I think it can be very hard in the moment. I know we talk about that awareness a lot, but what can a parent do to sort of get them to a place of having that control where they're able to implement that pause? Because that can be very difficult in the moment.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any books that you can pick up that
Probably not.
that are going to give that. And there's lots of people that I'm sure will pontificate on that, but each person is so different, and each situation is so different. So I think it's, golly gee, I think it's an awareness, but it's an analysis, because I think a lot of the pauses that we have. That we recognize we did not pause well, or we did not assess well, or we did not choose well. Analysis can help us say, okay, what could I have done differently in that situation when the salad bowl hit the ground, and that was the family heirloom salad bowl kind of thing. And so that's a good question. I don't know that I have a specific answer for you, other than a continual conscious awareness of what you do and how you can adapt in the future.
Sure, you're 100% right, and I think it comes down to that awareness and us realizing on our own that we are in control of that, and it starts with the awareness of everything that we're doing in order to bring about that pause in the first place, and how we're going to react to something. So, I think you talk about the pause as something that can be very helpful to parenting and stuff. How about for parents that are, I guess you could say, first-time parents? They're listening to this, or they're looking for books to read. And I know we talked about before that there are no books in a certain way regarding how to deal with certain situations, and it's those experiences that you're going to go through that bring about parenting. But are there certain things that a parent or a couple can do beforehand to sort of help prep and get them ready for being a parent that you've seen?
Well, a big thing is be a good spouse. I mean, if you're a good family member, if you're a good spouse, you understand what your spouse is going through and can adapt to that. Pause, assess, and choose, even in the responses to your spouse, goes a long way to understanding what's going to happen with your children. I think appropriately so, a lot of parents rely on their families, their own parents, the grandparents. Though I have always cautioned all the first-time parents that I see, especially if the grandparents are not in the room, I say, listen to what they say, be very polite, smile, and say thank you, and then do what you think is right.
That's a good point.
Um,
Yeah.
avoid any of those
Yeah.
confrontations, especially when the grandmother says, "I know you have to do it this way because that's how we did it 30 years
Yeah.
ago."
Exactly.
Um, so go, rely very heavily on your trusted professional, especially for first-time parents, in terms of your pediatrician, your family practice physician, or those folks, because they can be very helpful.
Sure.
And look for trusted people. That's very key.
I like that. That for sure makes a lot of sense. And I think when it comes to, we are who we are based on our background and where we came from. So obviously there's going to be a certain, we are going to gravitate in a certain way towards what our parents did to us or what they're going to say to us. But I think having that awareness that we've been talking about and realizing, hey, you know what, for this child, or this is not going to work that way. One of my daughters being diagnosed ADHD, and me and my siblings, that was not something that was ever on the table, whether it was diagnosed or not. So the way I'm going to deal with her is going to be a little bit different than what my mom or my dad might say. And they're coming from a good place. And I think that's also an important message for people to realize. Grandparents are coming from a good place is because they share a common enemy, us, the parents, in a certain way with the children. So they want the best for them, and when they're saying those things that sound overbearing, that sound like being bossy, sound like them being a parent, I think it's coming from a place of love where they want to help. And it's our job to be respectful, like you were saying, but also to realize, okay, thank you so much. We're going to deal with it in that sense. And I think that could sometimes be a conflict. And as we deal with holiday season coming up and a lot more family get-togethers, there could be a lot of parents in the room, especially if you're a first-time parent or grandparent, and putting yourself in a position to want to do everything. Well, this is what we did. This is what we did. This is how we warmed up the milk. This is how we nursed. This is how we did all these things. Okay, well, things are a little bit different, but it doesn't mean that we can't be respectful to the elders and take everything in that say, and hopefully put us in a place to everyone to get along and continue that family enmeshment in a very healthy, productive way going forward for many more years. That sense.
So that same pause, assess, and choose applies there.
Exactly.
In terms of pause, if the advice from your mother or mother-in-law can turn you into a puddle of emotion if you're a first-time mother, hopefully you'll learn how to pause and just reflect that, deflect that, and then assess it, and then choose the best response going forward. Try not to internalize that, because that can for a lot of mothers, a lot of first-time mothers, that can be quite devastating.
Oh, yeah.
I've learned, especially if there's always been some antagonism with their mother and mother-in-law or whatever.
For sure. On that note regarding like specific things to do. Now we have situations. Let's say switching gears here just a little bit on this topic, where let's say there's either a family background or let's say an educational system that our kids might be in, that are not necessarily within the same type of mind frame that we have in our beliefs and our core beliefs, and sometimes it could be a little bit of a conflict. Not just regarding political, but regarding philosophical or even religious ways that could be very different. What would you say to a parent that is trying to put certain types of belief onto their children, but at the same time growing up in an environment that might have their community at large might have a different point of view on certain things? Can a parent deal with that in a healthy balance?
Well, I would argue that what you describe would be a process in terms of
Sure.
explaining, because in one visit, if a mother came in and voiced complaints about this or that, and if I spent 5 minutes telling what I think she should do, I suspect she'd go out to the car and say, "Boy, I'm never going to trust another word he says." So it's going to be a process for me to be empathic and understand the place she's in and the family's in. And how I can help them try to gently show another point of view, another perspective that I think would be healthy for the child going forward. I do not want to take over what you're trying to teach your child in terms of core religious beliefs or whatever, but I think it is very important for today's children to be exposed to these other things, and here's why. The same argument in many ways is trying to... the people that come in and don't want to vaccinate their children. How can I? And so, I'm not going to turn that around in one visit. I'm going to have to gently sort of emphasize, present my point, and then over time see what we can do.
Yeah. Conversation and communication. And I think that's also goes back to the parenting as well. And that's how you get people or our children to see things in a certain way of why we don't want them to be out at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night and they're, only a junior in high school, or it's not going to happen because I said so. While that might work for a 6 or 7-year-old, saying that, a young teenager won't work the same. Maybe for a little bit, and if you have a certain type of home, but after a while, kids realize that they do have a mind of their own and they are independent. They're like, because you said so what? What does that mean? So I think having that, conversation and communication, I think goes a very long way. And even when it comes to, like you were saying, and that, I think 100% that could be very, very helppful. Now, let's say when it comes to setting a certain structure or boundaries, and let's say even specifically regarding what I guess nowadays this has been dubbed screen time and internet use. What are some, I guess you could say, pointers that parents can try to use for themselves regarding a structure in the home?
Well, like so many things, it has to begin with the parent. And so their screen time should be no greater than what they demand of their child, though they might argue, well, because they're the parent and they have to do more, but they have to present that in a rational way, in terms of, but obviously there's certain, and I think in our previous talk, I think you mentioned you shut down your screen time at 7:30.
Yeah.
That's a great example of what can and should be done in terms of providing an example for our children going forward in terms of what we should do in terms of the computer, our phone, our tablet, our whatever. That is, there are certain times we can do and certain times we cannot do it. Obviously, meal times and bedtime preparation and other significant family times. And if it's a screen time window when everyone can look at their screen, so be it. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends obviously no screen time for the first year or two, and then after that, no more than an hour a day.
Oh wow! Until what age?
Above 2.
Wow. I don't know if many people are keeping
that. That does not include instructional time.
Okay.
That's
recreational.
That's recreation. Right. So if they're using their computer for homework or their tablet or their phone for homework or whatever, that's not included. And now again, not many people are going to adhere to that. But an awareness of the problems with being devoted to too much screen time is very important. And it's not just the parent. Obviously, the parent has to provide the right example, but then just can't yell because it's bad for you. Has to explain that it's taking away from your ability to learn other ways in terms of what's in the environment, what's outside, reading this book, time where the family plays games or other interactive times that the family can and should be together.
Sure. I think the point that I think is I would like to just emphasize more from what you were saying. It starts with the parents. If you're going to be on your phone and screaming at your kids or getting off the tablet, it's not going to work, at least in the long run. Maybe with a 3-4-year-old, but I think past that, it starts with you. And I think I don't have any books out. I know you have a book out, but I think that's one of the places that I would like to focus on. Maybe even as my title of my book is call it Starts With You, because I think that's where parenting sort of starts from. But I know you talk about it a little bit in your book. Maybe you could talk about it a minute here regarding what message you're trying to give over to others and what it is, and going through those 5 steps. If you could spend the last as we wrap things up over here, how it's something that can be beneficial to us.
Well, to me, the whole point of the 5 steps to community improvement and now this conscious parenting using the parental awareness threshold is conscious awareness is the ability to learn, understand, and alter responses with the ultimate goal of raising our children to be good citizens. Not happiness. I think happiness is a secondary effect. And a personal example, my parents divorced when I was young. And my mother My father was an alcoholic, so it was a very difficult situation. He was he wasn't physically abusive, but it was verbally abusive, and not at home at times. And so, as my mother went through this amazing single parenting process, because she provided I hope whatever I'm saying now, I could say is from my mother. The She said, "Bob, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy when you grow up." And if I had listened to that purely and gone off on my own selfish ways, I wouldn't be where I am here today. But obviously, she provided the right example and has raised me to be a good, healthy citizen. Um, I found myself the same way when my first marriage ended in divorce, telling my oldest son, "I just want you to be happy." And then I realized, no, 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 no. I've got to do better than that. It's my responsibility to make sure that he understands what it is to be a good citizen. Helping other parents be the best parent you can be. Get involved, stay involved, love for others, and forgiveness. And by doing those and a whole host of other traits, empathy, sincerity, humility, all the various things that if I could provide the positive example for that, then he could be the good citizen. And if you're a good citizen, if you care for others, if you care about others, I think that will lead to intrinsic happiness.
Beautiful.
If your goal is happiness, and then whatever else comes along, I think we've got it bass backwards. Pardon the French.
No, very good. I think that's it's exactly how we get to happiness. Happiness is not a I don't remember the exact line. I remember hearing about it once, but happening is not a state of mind, but it's a place of consciousness of where we are and how we put ourselves to be doing, and therefore we're able to be happy. And I think by giving over and being part of the community and giving in a certain way, that brings us to the ultimate happiness. And it's not just about being happy as much as it is, at least from what I see it, is you're doing happy. And by putting ourselves in a place of giving, I think in many ways, and I think I see this as I get older. Not that I'm an old man in any way, but the different levels of happiness, or different levels of giving over, different levels of love. There sometimes when you have a day off after working for a long time, the last thing you want to do is to spend it the entire day at the state fair or at a carnival or an amusement park. You want to just kick back, relax, and just sit on your porch and just enjoy yourself. But that's what your kids want to do because they're off too. So you'll go with them. You'll go on some rides in the merry-go-round, and then when you see them smiling and happy, that makes everything that you work for and this quote-unquote off day where you're so busy so worth it. And it puts you in a place of, oh, I'm so happy right now. And happy is not even about sitting on the recliner with your favorite drink and listening to some music and not wearing shoes or having to worry about making looking all nice. Happiness is about watching yourself, giving over to others and seeing them happy. So I think being part of the community, giving over, which I think is also a big part of love as well, and we'll get to that in a second on how I look at it. But I think that's exactly what happiness is. Happiness is about giving over, and therefore it creates the happiness, and not just a place of where you are going to be by yourself in a certain way.
And that's sort of that's interesting because how that's evolved for me is, I just hung up my stethoscope a year ago.
Oh, wow.
And retired clinically. How very difficult because you're just so engaged and so in love with your families and the families. They always say, "You've taught me so much. You've been so helpful." But the reality is they've taught me so much in terms. And so as I look to other ways to engage, I might have retired, but I'm certainly not going to withdraw.
Good line.
From the engagement of helping children. Continuing to write and continuing to advocate for children, because my first book was called "My Children's Children: Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine," and my children's children were three things: my children's children, my grandchildren. Right. I now have grandchildren. All the children I've cared for over the years, my children's children, and all the children I've advocated for, my children's children. So I like to think that
Beautiful.
Spectrum will continue. And I'm going to do that until they put me in.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's very hard. You reminded me of something. It's an old saying that I grew up with, where it's from my teachers I learned a lot, from my peers I learned even more, but it's from my disciples, from my students that I learned the most. And I think, to hearing how heartbreaking in a certain way it was for you, but at the same time, it's also the ultimate compliment when you can hear from others like, oh, you've taught me so much. And you're like, really? Like, you're the one that I've been collecting. You've been paying me for this, and you're the one that's, so it's sort of like, how does that work? But I think that's the ultimate sign of giving over. And when you're at a point where there's that mutual respect and love that comes about for something, and on that point of love, and I think this comes in regarding children, whether it's our own or disciples of some sort, we love them and we do for them, even though sometimes we don't agree with them. And I think that as a parent, it's so important to be in a place where, my kids are going to make decisions I may not like, but I still have a obligation to love them and to put myself in a place of doing what's right for them, even though I might not agree with them. And you reminded me of that as you were talking before regarding certain things that you've seen be important with parenting. It was my son's birthday recently, and it's also Hanukkah time, so we had to give him a big present. And there were certain things that he's done, he's accomplished, that we felt we wanted to up the game a little bit, probably more than we've ever done. And as a parent, and hearing so many stories of how electric scooters could be so dangerous, it was always something like, I'm never going to get one for my child. But knowing how bad my son wanted one, and knowing the work that he's done, on himself, academically, socially, working with therapists and tutors, I felt like, what? I have to put aside my own ego and my own, what I think is the right thing, and get him the thing that I know he wants really, really bad. And, sucked it up. And my wife and I were able to we're fortunate enough to be able to get him a scooter. And he said, like, it made the past year of the tutoring worth it. I'm like, that's amazing to hear him say that, to even though I have no interest of ever seeing him on that scooter, from the bottom of my heart, but I at the same time want to see him with a smile on his face. I want to see him continue to do the things that he's done. I think it's important to make sure that you put aside your own beliefs when it comes to, this is what I think is the right thing, and doing what's right for the child. And that's the love that I think that you're talking about.
Make sure he has
Make
sure he has the helmet.
Knee pads, elbow pads. We're gonna put a pillow around his waist, and it's gonna be he'll be taken care of in that sense. But yeah, I think that's to your point. I think is very, very important, of that love of doing things, even though sometimes you may not want to, but it's the right thing in a certain way.
The other thing, quickly, about in terms of being in it, there's a great little book called From Aging to Saging, and that as we become older, we can just age, or we can sage, and that's my goal, is not to become elderly, but to become an elder. Now I've lost, and am losing some of my physical capabilities that I had when I was a youngster, and I'm losing some of those mental things. But I'm damned if I'm going to let them keep me from doing the best I can in terms of being an elder and trying to become a sage, and being a spokesman in the community for what I now, because I'm, in some ways it's good that the filter is more porous now, because I can say things that I wouldn't have said 20 or 30 years ago, but I feel they're so important,
for sure,
that need to be said.
Yeah. Okay. So wrapping up over here, the one question that I wanted to sort of get to, and I think as we're going through this, I know you've talked a lot about, and we'll go through different things, how people can reach you going forward. You've talked about how parenting is a journey, and how it's something that it takes time, and it's not necessarily a straight path, so to speak. What are some of the useful synopsis or maps that you have picked up or discovered along the way?
Well, I tried to put all of those in my last little book,
Mm-hmm.
Conscious Parenting, using the parental threshold. Be willing to learn, be willing to then understand the changes, and be willing to alter responses accordingly. As you dealing with things, be conscious of where you are, and where the child is. Children will change developmentally, as we've said. The response of a 2-year-old to what we say to a 6-year-old to a 14-year-old will be very different. The flippant 14-year-old might make us very angry, but if we understand that that's what 14-year-olds do, then we can alter our responses accordingly, so we avoid confrontation. So it's understanding the developmental stages of your child and understanding where you are yourself. Because each of us, and again, I can't emphasize enough, and you know in your profession, each of us is at a different stage every day, has a different response. When dad comes home and the 1-year-old's in the high chair throwing the peas on the floor, and he thinks that's so cute, and for mom, that's the last straw. I mean, she's just had it. All the other things you mentioned in terms of the homework being here, there, and everywhere, and the
Yeah.
kids just running around driving her crazy. I mean, so you have to understand where you are, where your children are, and where you are within your family. So a conscious awareness from so many levels is probably the key factor that I think is
For sure.
present. If we're going to all, change our responses to hopefully get our children to be good citizens.
That's great. 100%. What piece of advice would you give your younger self with all this experience that you now have as a parent and you being a first-time parent? What would you tell yourself if you had to go back a few years ago?
Um, be more aware. Be that as I was so, I mean, I was so narrowly focused on my career that early on, because I was doing both pediatrics and medical genetics, and I was in the field of medical genetics in the time when it was just in the
Brand
early
new,
stages,
right?
and so I was so focused on my career, I don't think I took enough steps back, and part of that was during my training. I mean, I trained in the 1970s when um, 120 hours a week was sometimes a slack week. I mean, so it was,
A little bit different
and,
than today.
and when I came and when I came out of training and only had to work every third night and every third weekend, I thought that was a piece of cake. But even that was a drain. Uh, so it's just being more aware
Sure.
and trying to understand myself and others
For
better,
sure.
and and forgiveness. But I'm not sure that I could. I'm not sure that my 30-year-old self could have had a level of forgiveness that my 70-year-old self now has. I think that just
Yeah.
evolves.
Yep. And I think it's part of,
It's easy to tell people what to do, but it's hard to
implement it.
incorporate it.
No,
It
for
takes
sure. It takes some time. Okay, so as we wrap up over here, I always like ending in a 1 or 2 sentence wrap up over here of what people were able to take from the conversation that we had. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go first because I think there's so much that
Sure.
I learned today. I took my own notes, and I think it's something that I'm going to have to sort of just ruminate with on my own to sort of make sure that I'm able to get everything from this. And I think while there is a big concept of awareness, which is vital, and that's been our MO for today, I think there's the realization that there's so many different steps and aspects to parenting, and today is different than yesterday, and it's going to be very different tomorrow than it is today, and we have to be aware of that. Regarding who we are as people, and maybe it's something we haven't touched on. Maybe we'll have a different time to talk about this more. But I think parents' self-care and taking care of themselves is where it sort of starts from, and it starts with you before it goes to someone else. So those were the 2 big points that I was able to learn from today. I'm curious, Doctor, what were some of the things that you were able to learn from today?
Well, I like that summary. I mean, I think one of the big things is parenting to me is not an innate ability. Biologically, it might be innate, but in today's high technology, complex sociologic society, it's very difficult to sort out everything that's coming at children and ourselves. So we really have to sort of, as we can, simplify and be more conscious about what's happening.
Yeah, that's beautiful. If some of my fellows, if they would like to get more in contact, do you have a website or a place they can reach out to you?
I have a website. It's called mychildren'schildren.com.
Awesome.
And that lists the books that I've done, and the most recent book. And again, the Conscious Parenting book is it's meant to be a very short, easy read that one can go back to frequently. But also on that website, I post blog entries every 2 to 3 weeks about various issues of interest. My most recent one was about the correctness of political correctness.
It's a big topic right now, that's for sure.
I love being engaged. And there's a contact page on there. If somebody wants to get in contact with me, we'd love to respond to any questions or concerns people have.
Okay.
Hey again. I hope you were able to learn as much as I did today. Thank you so much for staying to the end and listening to the entire interview. Please feel free to leave a comment wherever you listen to this podcast. All comments will be read weekly, and we appreciate all feedback and ideas. If you have an idea for a guest or a specific topic, please feel free to share. Additionally, you can contact us at parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for joining today, and remember, parenting is a journey. Don't forget to enjoy it. The goal is to be a little better today than yesterday, and hopefully better tomorrow than we were today.